and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. US President Joe Biden has announced sanctions on Myanmar's military rulers over the last week's coup. In a press conference, Biden called on the military to release all leaders and activists as protests against the army rule continues. The move will block Myanmar military's access to $1 billion of government funds held in the US. China's President Xi Jinping says confrontation between Beijing and Washington will be disastrous for both countries. In his first phone call conversation with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden, Xi recommended caution over matters related to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang. Meanwhile, President Biden said the U.S. military is undertaking a comprehensive review of its strategic position against China. The U.S. nuclear watchdog says Iran has started producing small amounts of uranium metal in the latest breach of 2015 nuclear deal. In a statement, International Atomic Energy Agency head Rafael Grossi said the IAEA inspectors have confirmed that 3.6 grams of metal has been produced at Isfahan nuclear facility. The uranium metal can be used to make the core of an atom bomb. Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is observing a complete shutdown to mark the martyrdom anniversary of a prominent leader, Maqbool Bhatt. The All-Parties Hurriyat Conference says the sacrifices by Kashmiris will not be allowed to go waste and their mission will be accomplished at all costs. New Delhi had hanged Bhatt in Tihar jail in 1984 for his role in the Valley's freedom movement. The COVID-19 is hitting Latin America hard as Mexico and Brazil have each registered over 1,300 fatalities in the last 24 hours. In Pakistan, over 1,500 people tested positive and 57 lost lives overnight as the death toll nears 12,200. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 2.35 million lives and infected over 107 million people so far. And in tennis, Russia's Andrei Rublev last passed Brazil's Thiago Monteiro in straight sets in Australian Open. Rublev qualifies for the third round of the tournament with a comfortable 6-4, 6-4, 7-6 win over Monteiro on John King Arena. In women's single, top-seeded Ashley Barty has also advanced to third round after beating Daria Gavrilova 6-1, 7-6. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, and now the news in detail. In Myanmar, protesters have returned to the streets of capital Naypyidaw after clashes in the anti-coup demonstrations yesterday. Hundreds of government workers marched in support of a civil disobedience campaign that has also been joined by doctors. Meanwhile, the United States and United Nations have condemned the use of force against protesters. U.S. President Joe Biden has also announced sanctions on Myanmar's military rulers over the last week's coup. In a press conference, Biden called on the military to release all leaders and activists. The curbs will block Myanmar military's access to $1 billion of government funds held in the U.S. China's President Xi Jinping says confrontation between Beijing and Washington will be disastrous for both countries. President Xi said this during his phone conversation with the U.S. counterpart Joe Biden.
President Xi cautioned Biden over matters related to Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang. He said both sides should re-establish the means to avoid misjudgments and manage disputes constructively. For his part, Biden told Xi that it was a U.S. priority to preserve a free and open Indo-Pacific region. In a statement, the White House said the two leaders also exchanged views on shared challenges, including pandemic and climate change. Meanwhile, during his first visit to the Pentagon, President Biden said the U.S. military is undertaking a comprehensive review of its strategic position against China. Biden said a new China task force will be formed to look at Washington's strategy and future posture.
As former President Donald Trump's impeachment trial enters its second day at the U.S. Senate, House managers argue that Trump's comments to supporters before the Capitol riots amounted to incitement of insurrection. The impeachment managers methodologically pieced together the violence using Trump's own words and tweets against him. They argued that Trump left members of Congress for dead in Capitol riot. The leader of the Democratic prosecution team, Jamie Raskin, called Trump the insider-in-chief of the anarchy on 6th of January.
The evidence will show you that ex-President Trump was no innocent bystander. The evidence will show that he clearly incited the January 6th insurrection. It will show that Donald Trump surrendered his role as commander-in-chief and became the inciter-in-chief of a dangerous insurrection.
Democrats will continue to argue their case for conviction on Thursday before Trump's lawyers take to the stand in his defense. And now moving on, the UN's nuclear watchdog says Iran has started producing small amounts of uranium metal in the latest breach of 2015 nuclear deal. In a statement, International Atomic Energy Agency said its inspectors confirmed production of 3.6 grams of metal at Iran's Isfahan facility. The statement read, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi has informed the agency's member states about recent developments. It said Iran's activities on uranium metal production are a part of its aim to produce fuel for the Tehran research reactor. The uranium metal can be used to make the core of an atom bomb. Meanwhile, U.S. State Department spokesperson said Washington continues to urge Tehran to resume full compliance with the deal. He said the U.S. hopes to pursue the pathway of diplomacy in order to resolve this urgent challenge. The U.S. has condemned the armed drone attack on Saudi Arabia's International Aba airport that set a civilian aircraft on fire. White House spokesperson says the attack coincides with a special U.S. and UN envoy's visit to Riyadh for Yemen's peace. White House spokesperson Jen Psaki says the Houthis continually demonstrate a desire to prolong the Yemen war by attacking Saudi Arabia. In a press briefing, she said the U.S. will continue to engage stakeholders for a negotiated settlement in the war in Yemen. Meanwhile, the State Department says Secretary Antony Blinken held a telephone call with Saudi Foreign Minister Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud. Earlier, UN envoy Martin Griffiths and U.S. envoy Timothy Lender-King met Saudi Deputy Defense Minister to discuss the situation in Yemen. The UN Special Envoy also visited Iran as efforts to find a comprehensive solution to the conflict. Prominent Iraqi cleric Muqtada al-Sadr has expressed his support for early general elections overseen by the UN. Iraq is set to hold early polls this year, which was the central demand of an anti-government protest movement which broke out in 2019. In a press conference, al-Sadr said though supervision is required, but foreign countries should not interfere in the vote. The elections were initially set for June but have since been pushed back to October. Iraq's election commission had requested more time to implement measures needed to hold free and fair elections. The elections will be taking place under a new electoral law which eliminated list-based voting. Chinese and Indian troops have started to disengage simultaneously from the contentious Ladakh border shared by the two countries. China's Defense Ministry spokesperson said the disengagement happened at the north and the south shore of Pangong Tso Lake. Meanwhile, Indian Defense Minister Rajnath Singh said Beijing and New Delhi have reached an accord to disengage troops from the Western Himalayas. He said the agreement was finalized after several rounds of talks between military commanders and diplomats. India and China have been fighting for decades over the largely uninhabited Aksai Chin region, including a brief war in 1962. However, the standoff turned violent last year in Sikkim state when 20 Indian soldiers were killed in a clash with Chinese troops. India's opposition party Congress has slammed Prime Minister Narendra Modi for not addressing concerns of protesting farmers during his speech at the parliament. Talking to media, Congress leader Adhir Ranjan Chaudhary said over 206 farmers have lost their lives, but the Prime Minister is not willing to say anything about it. Congress spokesperson Randeep Surjewala said Modi's commitment to the welfare of farmers is highly questionable. Earlier in his speech, Modi questioned the legitimacy of the farmers' movement. All 11 rounds of talks between the BJP government and farmers have failed. The Modi government refuses to repeal the contentious new farm laws, while the farmers say they won't settle for anything less. Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir is observing a complete shutdown to mark the martyrdom anniversary of a prominent leader, Maqbool Bhatt.
From a teacher to a political activist and one of the loudest voices for Kashmir's freedom, Maqbool Bhatt's journey is an inspiration for Kashmir youth. 7 days before his 46th birthday, Bhatt, one of the beacons of Kashmir's freedom struggle, was executed by India. New Delhi had hanged Bhatt in Tihar jail in 1984 and buried him in the premises of the prison. The All Parties Hurriyat Conference says the sacrifices by Kashmiris will not be allowed to go waste and their mission will be accomplished at all costs. Mobile and internet services remained suspended, while a large number of occupying forces have been deployed in Srinagar city and elsewhere to stop the protest rallies.
The COVID-19 is hitting Latin America hard as Mexico and Brazil have each registered over 1,300 fatalities in the last 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus has claimed over 2.35 million lives and infected over 107 million people so far. More on the coronavirus in this report.
Production challenges, supply chain issues, and uncertainties of a vaccine, coupled with the rapidly spreading, highly complicated coronavirus variants, mar the battle against COVID-19. The Canadian province of Newfoundland has gone from COVID-free sanctuary to circuit breaker lockdown as it faces its largest outbreak. In the U.S., Los Angeles is temporarily closing one of the country's largest vaccination sites at Dodger Stadium, among 4 others due to a lack of doses. California, the U.S. state with the highest number of COVID-19 deaths, has detected 2 cases of the South African mutant of the virus. Down south, Argentina has become the 12th nation to surpass 2 million coronavirus cases amid a host of problems involving the vaccination drive. A new report has found that children in Germany, especially from underprivileged backgrounds, are suffering from psychological issues due to the pandemic. However, Chancellor Angela Merkel has announced to again extend restrictions against COVID-19 until March 7. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has recommended the AstraZeneca vaccine even in the regions where the variant first found in South Africa is present. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has welcomed the organization's recommendation after some countries questioned its efficacy.
And let me stress that these vaccines are safe and effective, and it was good to see the World Health Organization today confirm its support for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine for use in everyone over the age of 18 and obviously everyone over 65, and also supporting the 12-week interval between the 2 doses. Indeed, they say the longer interval provides greater protection.
However, South Africa is considering trading its doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine and deploying Johnson & Johnson shots instead. Over in Australia, the Victoria state has ramped up contact tracing in Melbourne after a new COVID-19 cluster grew to 8 cases.
Pakistan has recorded another 57 deaths from COVID-19 overnight, raising the death toll to 12,185. The Health Ministry says 1,502 new infections have been detected overnight. The ministry said total number of cases detected in the country has crossed 559,000. So far, over 516,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The number of currently active COVID-19 cases in the country has topped 30,000. In Pakistan, a special search and rescue mission will be flown today to search for missing mountaineers. Pakistan's Muhammad Ali Sadpara, John Snorri from Iceland and Juan Pablo Mojar from Chile remain missing since summiting K2. Special forward-looking infrared will be used for the search mission. High-altitude climbers are also engaged for ground search as a result of any location spotted through FLIR mission. Earlier, Pakistan assured Chile of all possible efforts to rescue the climbers. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa has visited logistics installations in Rawalpindi. He was received by Chief of Logistics Staff Lieutenant General Azhar Saleh Abbasi and Quarter Master General Lieutenant General Amir Abbasi. The Army's media wing said General Bajwa was briefed on different military facilities being developed at the installations. The Army Chief lauded the highest levels of commitment in the provision of facilities and services by the logistics installations. He also hailed the one-window operation to get enhanced operational facilities. Now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The United Nations Security Council has urged Somalia's leaders to resume dialogue to arrange new elections. Britain called the meeting a day after Somalia's central government missed a deadline on how to proceed with the presidential elections. In a statement, the 15-nation council called on federal government and regional states to work together for inclusive polls. The Security Council also condemned renewed violence by the Al-Shabaab militant group. The council members will meet again on 22nd of February to renew the mandate of the African Union mission in Somalia. In Greece, police clashed with students protesting against education reforms expected to be approved by the parliament. Opponents say new law threatened guarantees to academic freedom built up in the years following the 1970s. Thousands of people rallied in central Athens and other big cities as legislators debated the bill. Police fired tear gas to disperse the demonstrators as fiery petrol bombs were lobbed at them. More than 24 people were detained following the clashes. The government says the reforms are designed to upgrade the system and overhaul admissions to state universities. They also aim to improve security by allowing the formation of special police units for university campuses.
For matters that are actual crimes, of course, they are committed by the police and no one else. It cannot fall to the university chancellor to chase the campus drug dealer or the person who is making petrol bombs or the person destroying property. That is not his job. We want the chancellor to deal with the administration of the school, to promote research and teaching, to be the face of the university.
Russia has issued an arrest warrant for Leonid Volkov, a close ally of Alexei Navalny. This comes after Volkov had called on Russians to hold protests this weekend to demand the release of the jailed Kremlin critic. A Moscow court says investigators requested Volkov's arrest after he was charged with inciting children to take to the streets. It said a warrant for his arrest has been issued across the Commonwealth of Independent States. The countries in CIS do not include Lithuania, from where Volkov oversees Navalny's regional headquarters. He has called for smaller-scale Valentine's Day protests in the wake of mass arrests during previous rallies. The United States says it will turn away most migrants apprehended at its border with Mexico under a Trump-era policy. At a news briefing, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said it was not the right time for new migrants to come to the U.S. border. Psaki said the move aimed to limit the spread of coronavirus. She added it will also give the Biden administration time to implement humane asylum processing systems. Psaki noted that asylum processes at the border will not occur immediately and will take time to implement.
due to the pandemic and the fact that we have not had the time as an administration to put in place a humane, comprehensive process for processing individuals who are coming to the border, now is not the time to come. And the vast majority of people will be turned away. Asylum processes at the border will not occur immediately, will take time to implement.
The comments come amid increasing pressure on President Joe Biden to reverse the restrictive policies of his predecessor Donald Trump. And now moving on to China's Tianwen-1 probe has successfully entered orbit around Mars after a nearly 7-month voyage from Earth. The China National Space Administration says the development marks the country's completion of a key step in its Mars mission. The probe, including an orbiter, a lander and a rover, will take about 10 Earth days to complete one full orbit of the planet. The spacecraft will now enter a temporary orbit serving landing sites in preparation to land on Mars in May or June. Wang Chuang, chief designer of Tianwen, said entering orbit was challenging and autonomous control was the key to success of the mission.
Entering Mars's orbit is a challenging task. The key is the probe's autonomous control. Scientists have preset an entry program on the probe. When approaching Mars, the probe will finish the orbital entry process by itself. The probe will circle around the planet, which means communication will be difficult once it reaches Mars's far side. Even if we sent a signal from Earth, it wouldn't reach the probe in time. So the probe will need to solve most major malfunctions, if there are any, that arise according to these preset programs.
The European Space Agency has congratulated China on Tianwen's one successful orbit entry. And now moving on to Nathan Nzanga, a young Afro-American artist from Seattle, is pushing for justice through his music and protests. The U.S.-born son of immigrants from Congo has been featured in a movie that adds his artistic perspective to the social justice movement. This report has more.
If you find out
Nzanga has written songs that reflect why he protests, compositions calling for change and telling his story as an Afro-American. Featuring his music, a short film starring Nzanga was released online last month. The 13-minute film starring Nzanga is titled Enough and opens with the song Truce.
Damn, when did we get like this? Seems like every day we add a few more names to the list. The innocent don't stay alive, the children are desensitized, and to be honest, I'm scared I'm the next one that they'll hit.
It's pretty much a documentary of me growing up, figuring out who I'm supposed to be or who I want to be, even with the challenges that the world's been throwing at me. And I don't know, you get to see me grow up from 11 to now, and you get to hear my thoughts from where I was at when I wrote Truce and where I'm at now.
Nzanga says he followed the news between camp activities and learned about the deaths of several fellow Afro-Americans. In his song Truce, the Seattle-based musician says, daily there is a new name on the list and he fears that he will be the next victim.
Can't love me if you don't know me. Can't know me if you don't hear me.
I wrote Truce to try to make a difference, and I wrote enough to say that, like, what else is there for me to do? Like, I feel tired. Like, how much love do I have to give to receive any love back?
The film also includes another song, which he wrote following the death of George Floyd, who was killed by a white police officer last year. Nzanga hopes people watch the film and acknowledge how he gave his best to spread a message of love.
Sunny day, ain't sitting out riding, I'm going out fighting. I got a whole lot of empathy.
While the pandemic has halted routine businesses around the world, dogs in Austria enjoy pampering at fancy salons. More about dog styles in this report.
It is hairy times for Austrian hairdressers as they came out of lockdown this week grappling with coronavirus testing and capacity restrictions. But the city's pampered dogs continue to enjoy getting a trim. Dog salons were allowed to stay open throughout the last 2 of Austria's 3 lockdowns. Now there is no requirement for owners to show a negative coronavirus test result as they would at the hairdresser.
Some of the owners are not as well groomed as their dogs are because dogs come and see me every 6 to 8 weeks. However, humans, they have not seen a hairdresser in a long time, and I think that might take a little while longer now that a negative coronavirus test is required.
A dog salon owner says it is completely justified that they have been allowed to work regularly. She says if the dogs do not get a trim, their hair becomes totally snarled and so close to the body that they have to be shaved. As for the dog owners, Zlatka Kuller and her 6-year-old Yorkshire Terrier Archie seems to love the job done at the salon.
So I typically go every 6 to 8 weeks for a trim and bath and, professional, because whatever you do at home, it's never on the same level, okay? So, and she really does a terrific job. I mean, he's ready to go on a show, okay, after he's done, okay.
The salon's owner says the closure during the first lockdown had created a backlog and it then had twice the work. Now the business is slower than usual as some customers are worried about getting infected.
Now it's time to have a look at the weather update across the globe. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.news.